Friends, we are starting now. Today is 153rd Friday group meeting. The speaker is our good friend Mr. Sridhar Potaraju, advocate on record also. Earlier he addressed our Friday group on 71st Friday group meeting. The topic was Uttarakhand High Court judgment declaring rivers Ganga and Yamuna as a juristic person. Today's topic is Indian Maxims as a bridge between litigants and the law. This was the book he was authored. So it was preface written by Ramasubramanian, present sitting judge of this thing. So thank you, Sridhar. Thank you very much. Before you start, I request Ankita will say a few words about CV of Sridhar Potaraju.
Mr. Sridhar Potaraju is a practicing advocate before the Honorable Supreme Court of India for over 2 decades. He hails from Hyderabad and he has done his graduation from Osmania University. He pursued his law from Campus Law Center, New Delhi, and then he became AOR in 2006. He has been a part of Ram Janambhoomi case and assisted Sri K. Parasaran sir. He has a very strong inclination towards Indian epics and he spends his leisure time in reading and researching about the subject. Sir has authored a book Maxims from Mahabharata and today he'll be sharing his experience and enlighten us about Indian Maxim as a bridge between litigants and law. Sir, please.
Good afternoon, Seshu sir. Good afternoon, friends, senior members of the bar, and my colleagues and friends in the bar. It's a great privilege and honor to be addressing the Friday group, which has now become a very legendary status with the viewers across the world now. Today's topic is premised on Indian Maxims as a bridge between litigants and the law. Before I go into the subject, I would like to just share my thoughts as to why I felt the need for Indian Maxims. As a student of law, we are exposed to a lot of Latin Maxims, and that Latin Maxims are part of our jurisprudence, and they are very useful in putting across a thought or a concept, and then the idea behind articulation of an argument becomes very clear when you put forward a maxim which everyone in the system understands. But more often than not, at least my experience of representing individuals, land acquisition cases were major work, family matters, revenue matters, etc. Most of the clients do not follow English, what to speak about Latin. So they are completely at loss about the reasoning or the explanations which we try to give to them, probably justifying the dismissal of their petition or explaining the grounds on which we succeeded, or when we give an advice or an opinion. So it is there that I found that we speak to our clients or probably the instructing lawyers in our own language and then explain to them in a Indian context, say in the sense of probably giving an illustration from something which everyone is generally aware of. So if we say that there's a very difficult task, if you can easily refer to a Bhagirath kind of an effort. So that puts across a point to most of the people, at least in India. They may not be literate, but they would understand what the effort of a Bhagirath was in bringing Ganga. So it is this kind of a communication gap which probably I experienced made me think about the need for Indian Maxims, because we have a great diversity of languages in our country and each language has beautiful idioms which actually communicate certain things more effectively than probably reams of paper can. So that's probably what I felt is the need of the hour, so that the people, the consumers of justice actually start relating to what we are doing in courts. And the judgments are also relatable to what they are trying to actually adjudicate and the principles on which they are adjudicating. In this context, I would like to start my talk by quoting a paragraph from the Keshavananda Bharati judgment, Justice Jagan Mohan Reddy, in para 1107. The citation of Keshavananda Bharati is 1973, 4 SCC 225, at page 614, para 1107. I'm just reading an excerpt from there. The seed of the Constitution is sown in a particular soil, and it is the nature and the quality of soil and climatic conditions prevalent there which will ensure its growth and determine the benefits it confers on people. We cannot plant the same seed in a different climate and in a different soil and expect the same growth and the same benefit therefrom. Law varies according to the requirements of time and place. Unquote. So this actually epitomizes the need probably to relate to the cultural and civilizational experience of the people of our land when we do the job of resolving or adjudicating the disputes between them. So it is important that they understand the principles being applied, and maxims are actually nothing but the pithy statements of truth, an axiom, or it can be a general principle leading truth, or a traditional legal principle that has been frozen into a concise expression. Now, the first and foremost thing which comes to us as Supreme Court lawyers is, what is the driving force of the Supreme Court? What is it that the constitutional forefathers have conceived for the Supreme Court to perform as its constitutional obligation? The motto of the Supreme Court defines it. Yato dharmas tato jaya. So one needs to look beyond the expression and try to understand what is the context and what is the meaning of Yato dharmas tato jaya. So the expression Yato dharmas tato jaya is traced to the Mahabharata. And in my reading of Mahabharata, I found this expression used by several characters, and it is spread about 10 to 11 times that I could locate. The most prominent one is referred to Gandhari, the mother of the Kauravas. She, in fact, is stated to have blessed Duryodhana on all 18 days of the war. Whenever he sought the blessings of his mother, that he should probably bless to be Vijayi Bhava, so that he will be victorious. But the only blessing Gandhari gives Duryodhana is Yato dharmas tato jaya, which epitomizes the character of Gandhari, a woman of her times who chose dharma over her son. There is a very negative stereotype about mothers being very doting about the sons, and then actually choosing their sons over even probably daughters or anything else. Here is a mother who for 18 days, knowing fully well that day after day her son's army and the leaders are getting killed, chooses to bless him with Yato dharmas tato jaya. That has become the motto of our Supreme Court. And then it can be correlated to the power that has been conferred by the constitutional framers under Article 142, which says to do complete justice. So therefore, to do complete justice could be beyond the procedural limitations prescribed by various statutes. So therefore, ultimate object of the entire process of administration of justice is to achieve or to find out truth. Truth is the end goal in a dispute between parties, and dharma is to be established through enforcement of the truth through an adjudication process which leads to victory of dharma, that is Yato dharmas tato jaya. Now this motto of Supreme Court is something which actually is the benign principle which should be guiding most of us as practitioners in this court as to what is it the end goal of probably the entire legal fraternity is. Are we here only to what we can call as a debaters who would try to win a debating point, or are we to participate in the administration of justice as in equal stakeholders, where we put across points in accordance with the principles of procedure and evidence, but bearing in mind that our final object is to ensure dharma prevails. Dharma is not a religious connotation. Dharma is the highest virtue, the virtue which would prevail in all times and in all circumstances. So that is the most important part, as I see, as a maxim that the Supreme Court has been actually taken up as its motto. Yato dharmas tato jaya. Now if we move forward, looking at the concepts of public interest over private interest. Now that's the common refrain. Most of the public interest litigations or any interest where the larger public are actually beneficiaries, but there are certain set of people who will have to be sacrificed. The most common illustration could be land acquisition. The land could be acquired for larger public good. So therefore the statutes which authorize the exercise of the sovereign power of forcefully acquiring private properties which are constitutionally protected under Article 300A is the larger public interest or the larger public good of the people of the country. Now, if we look at that, the submergence of several villages pursuant to construction of irrigation projects is the first thing which come to our mind. There are two aspects to it. One, the need for an irrigation project which would necessarily mean submergence, and then removal of certain villages of all its human inhabitation and the cattle and everything else which is part of that ecosystem. Once that is moved out, what is the consequence of that is the rehabilitation. Now there could be issues about the implementation of rehabilitation programs, etc. But that aside, the larger good of the public or the nation is which is actually the most important thing that comes to one's mind. In this regard, I would like to just draw a reference to a maxim from the Mahabharata, which I have had an opportunity to explore. So when we say that there is a kind of acquisition which is leading to certain larger public good and also certain loss or actually sacrifice of an individual or a group of individuals. So every decision, invariably, as lawyers we face dismissals and then also positive orders. So every decision is actually bound to have both elements, some good and some bad. So nothing is purely 100% good or something 100% bad. So in this context, I would like to refer to I will just read the English translation. There is no act which is entirely pure, nor any that is entirely simple. In every act, right or wrong, something of both prevails. I mean, the case of land acquisition and submersion, this is what happens. So now, when we look at this maxim from Mahabharata, this is in Shanti Parva, where Arjuna is actually trying to talk to his own brother Yudhishthira and console him. Post-war, he gets into a situation of depression. He says that I should not have gone for a war. It is only for the kingdom that I went for war. So it's in that context that Arjuna tells him that every action will have some good and some bad. It is the larger good that should be the driving force, where the war was a war for establishment of dharma. So therefore, we also know that it is referred to as the Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. Another maxim that I would like to refer in this context of sacrifice of an individual, this in fact we keep hearing from our men in uniform, where they sacrifice everything that they have, including the supreme sacrifice of their own lives for us, so that we actually can sit and then debate about free speech and expression and right to life and all nuances thereof. But it is a man on the border or the man in uniform who's actually sacrificing his life, and their families which are sacrificing to ensure that we have a right to protest democratically. In this regard, I would like to read out from the Udyoga Parva, which is also known as the discourse between Vidura and Dhritarashtra, as popularly known as the Vidura Niti. An individual may be sacrificed for the clan, a clan may be sacrificed for the village, a village may be sacrificed for a nation, and entire earth may be sacrificed for Atma. So they go beyond the physical world. Here, the message is that in case of your Atma, then the entire world needs to be sacrificed. That is probably with reference to your decision making could lead to your own. So a man on the border, probably he is actually going by his conscience and giving it everything else, including his life, his responsibilities towards his minor children, family, everything. And then they give the supreme sacrifice that they do for the larger good of the nation. I mean, we can also recall of the Maharshi Dadichi, who actually gives up his body, and the Vajrayudha which Indra carries is made out of his spine. So that's the kind of sacrifice that we learn from these kind of maxims. Now if I move to environment. So environment, we all are familiar. The Supreme Court has in fact from MC Mehta and several other judgments has set out the principles of precautionary principle, sustainable development, intergenerational equity. So these are all principles which are universal. There are several conventions which actually have recognize these principles globally. In this context, I mean, if you refer to sustainable development, the Intellectual Forum judgment of Supreme Court, or you have the judgment in RLEK, where they have looked at the importance of air, ambient air quality, etc. in 1989 itself. So these principles are actually there in the Maxims in Mahabharata. If I may just refer to a few of them, rather a couple of them, I would like to read out from the Bhishma Parva. The maxim goes like this: the threefold fruits of dharma, wealth and pleasure can be milked from earth, like from a wish-giving cow, if the resources are used prudently. So therefore, there is a maxim in the Mahabharata, in the Bhishma Parva, where they talk about the earth being milked like a wish-giving cow, that is the Kamadhenu as we refer to, where all your wishes can be granted. So the idea of a sustainable development has been sowed in this maxim. It has been there where we say that if you can actually use it prudently, so therefore there should be a balance for the per need of a development as well as the exploitation of the resources that are available at our disposal. Now if I look at another sloka in this context, it's very interesting. I mean, all of us are familiar with the Project Tiger that we have, and the animal kingdom and the need of carnivores as the top of the food chain in a forest to keep the ecological balance of the forest, so that the herbivores don't finish off the grainlands and the greenery in the forest and desertify them. So the presence of carnivores is very important to sustain the forest, so that they keep a balance control on the herbivores from finishing the forest. So in this regard, there is a very nice maxim in Udyoga Parva again, Vidura Niti, where Vidura says, a forest without lions is destroyed and lions without forest will perish. So the idea of the interdependence of a forest on lions and the lions per se on the forest is actually there in the Vidura Niti that we see. Another similar expression is given again in Udyoga Parva. So these ideas or eternal truths or general principles have always been there, and these are something which are actually the guiding force for generations of people. When we see our people in the rural areas, they actually are very wise, I would say. They may not be literate in the standard expression of literacy in English or probably any of the languages that we acknowledge, but they are wise. Now, where does this wisdom come from is the question that always surprised me. So moving ahead, we can also look at a very interesting expression. I mean, I've been a researcher, so I try to understand the origins of things, etc. So in that process, when I was going through this, in Shanti Parva, Bhishma is talking about the characteristics of a good man. Who is a good person? So this is very interesting. The good or the righteous never answer the calls of nature on the public road, in cow pens or paddy field. I was quite surprised when I came across this. In fact, this comes again in Anushasana Parva also. So the idea of hygiene in public space, or probably what now the government has popularized as Swachh Bharat, was always there. So a good person is a person who doesn't defecate on the highways or in the cow pens or in the paddy fields. It's so simple, and then it puts across a point. So I thought probably this could be the idea behind Mahatma Gandhi's campaign for cleanliness being godliness, or the current government's regime of Swachh Bharat, because it has multiple public health issues also which are interlinked. So this is a beautiful maxim that I find as far as the health and hygiene are concerned. Now there's something very interesting all of us are familiar with. We come across arguments in courts, applications filed asking the judge to recuse. Now it's become a norm. I mean, at least earlier I have not seen that happen as frequently, but of late we see that more often than not. So, I mean, one wonders, what is it that the bar is actually seeking? I mean, without going on to the merits of the applications or such kind of a prayers, there were a couple of judgments which dealt with it in Supreme Court. The Indo Development Authority in 2026 SEC 305, they have actually dealt with this demand for recusal, elaborately referred to the case law. They discuss whether a judge who happened to express an opinion could be part of a larger bench when that question itself is the subject of reference to a larger bench. And they also cite cases where a judge who was part of a smaller bench and had taken a particular view while on the larger bench has actually agreed with the reasons and then taken a contrary view. So therefore, amenability to reason is a sine qua non of rule of law, where people are actually accepting a principle over an individual position. So that is epitomized in this judgments which are referred to there. In facts of each case, the court would take a view one way or the other. But this is something which always is quite interesting. In this context, I came across an interesting conversation. This conversation is actually originates in the Kuru Sabha, as the assembly of the Kauravas, where Draupadi is actually dragged in, and she's stated to have been sold or auctioned, staked and lost in the gamble. So there the issue which Draupadi raises, I mean, one of the most logical and brilliant arguments that remain unanswered, because all the learned men in the assembly have no answer to the questions that Draupadi raises. So it is in this context that we come across this anecdote which is cited. This is a conversation which is cited between Rishi Kashyapa, who is the guru of Prahlada. Prahlada is known to be the grandfather of Bali Chakravarti, in whose memory the Onam festival is celebrated. Prahlada is the person for whom the Narsimha Avatara has actually arrived. So it is in one family that the Vishnu takes two avatars, is the legend as far as these two families. But the principle that he speaks about, Rishi Kashyapa, while Prahlada is faced with a dilemma. He, being the king, is the arbiter of disputes. So his son comes before him along with a rival. They both wage each other's life on being the superior amongst the two of them. So they agree that Prahlada is the most suitable person to decide who is the superior between the two of them. It is in this context that the question of the responsibility of the person in an office comes about. A person occupying an office, when he is required to decide or perform his dharma or duty, does he have a choice to recuse? Prahlada recuses. He says that, sorry, there is an inherent bias. My son is one of the suitor before me, so therefore I will not be able to adjudicate. It is there that Rishi Kashyapa reminds him of his duty as a king. This maxim comes here. Dharma, when pierced by a dart of injustice, seeks redress in an assembly. It is the duty of everyone in such assembly to take out the dart, else they themselves will incur the sin in failing to perform their duty. It's so beautiful. So therefore, any person who is occupying that position. So I wondered, what is the responsibility of any constitutional judge? So then I looked at Schedule 3 of the Constitution, the oath that the judges have to take. The Supreme Court judges take as per the Form 4, the High Court judges take it in terms of Form 8. The oath is to perform their duties without fear or favor, affection or ill will, without. So, I mean, therefore, they have already taken an oath. I mean, it's quite, it triggered a thought in my mind. I mean, so having taken an oath, is it appropriate for anyone from the bar even to suggest that you should not hear? It is the call of the person, and how much does that person have to actually perform his oath or not to decide? It's a very interesting question. I don't have a correct or a final answer to it, but that's something which really triggered a thought in my mind. I mean, when you are actually put it's a very great dilemma. You have an oath on one hand and you have an apparent bias on one hand. So what do you choose? I mean, so it's and all of us are human. So probably everyone takes his own decision as per his own wisdom and then his conscience, and we have to respect them. So, but this maxim actually brings out the importance of a person having his adherence to dharma in terms of his position or the office that he occupies. So, then we have punishment. The principles governing punishment, I think we can have a chapter directly on that. In fact, in my book, I had to actually create a chapter for that. So to quickly refer to that, because of constraints of time, I'll just read about mens rea here, about punishments. Now, we are all familiar. In criminal law, mens rea is the critical part, where a person is actually in a position to punish, is occupying a office, or probably we exercise that disciplinary power against our own staff, our own colleagues in some positions like the bar councils or others. I felt that the person's ability to judge, etc., are criteria. This maxim speaks it all. One who commits an offense due to ignorance or foolishness deserves to be forgiven, for learning and wisdom are not always easily attainable by man. I mean, I can speak from my own experience. We have several people who come and approach to work with us, people migrating from different parts of the country looking for livelihood. So their cultural background, their limitations of opportunities, their wisdom, their smartness is lower. So they invariably commit mistakes. Now, if that mistake is due to ignorance or foolishness, how do we punish them? I mean, the maxim here makes it very clear. He deserves to be forgiven, for learning and wisdom are not always easily attainable by man, by their economic conditions, the social conditions. The Constitution recognizes them and talks about affirmative action as much. So therefore, I mean, in our own lives and also as lawyers, probably we can be using these maxims as a bridge where we can give these illustrations and give people the illiterate also can relate to, and then probably put across a point. I mean, as far as the formal usage in courts, I mean, I had an intern who was very inclined like me, and I asked him to look up and do a research on that project, and I think it's going to be a good publication when I'm able to do it. You'll all be surprised that he filled up 57 pages of judgments where these maxims have been used by the Supreme Court, starting from 1950 till 2020. So that really shows that this court has always used the Indian maxims or the Indian experience, and then has actually benefited in communicating a point or articulating their reasoning or their concern in the judgment. So while concluding my speech, I would like to just read one more paragraph or one more excerpt of the same paragraph from Keshavananda Bharati. See, we respect knowledge coming from all sides, and we've benefited. Knowledge is always something which can be aspired and learned from all species in the creation. So for us, we can learn from an ant or a tree or a plant or anyone, literate, illiterate. We have Adi Shankaracharya who learns from a person who's appearing to be a illiterate, untidy person as well. So we have a culture of learning from every source that comes in. But it is in this context that this excerpt from Keshavananda Bharati, I would like to conclude my talk. It is not a case of shutting out light where that could profitably enlighten and benefit us. The concern is rather to safeguard against the possibility of being blinded by it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sridhar. We never expected such a light on Mahabharata and your maxims and other things, so many quotations and relevant to our constitutional history and legal history, the Supreme Court taking several. Friends, for now, I request Vasan sir, put some light on, please sir, just you bring it, just you can straight, put some lights, you put some weight.
It's an interesting field of study which most of us tend to ignore. Therefore, I find the effort taken by Sridhar is of great value. As it is always said, law must be the quintessence of the common sense of the community. The problem that we have often is our common sense many times does not tally well with the common sense of law. the wider the gap between the common sense of the community and the common sense of the law as we understand it, the greater will be the disregard for law. In that context, I find it's a very, very welcome endeavor. I may not straight away accept that all the maxims under the various Vedas or the Puranas can be applied to our situation. But in making law more friendly to the people, more understandable for the people, working for the ultimate of the law being the common sense of the community, such efforts would greatly pay.
Yes.
I was intently listening to his talk. I went through the book also. I find it's a very great attempt. The endeavor is really great. I congratulate you for that, and I think we are all benefited by the insights into it. And there's a lot of areas of disagreement. I don't think if tomorrow, as some judge said, from tomorrow onwards, the Indian philosophical points are going to be applied to the law. I don't know where we will reach ultimately.
No, sir, it is about common sense. I'm talking about the litigants.
Exactly. No, it's only that. That's what I say. If you say that some of the principles are to be straight away imported, I think we are opening the floodgates of controversy and chaotic. It could be.
We can add to the chaos.
Yeah, it can add to the chaos. Yes, and therefore, the glory of the attempt, as you said, is I find it many times difficult to explain to somebody what is your law, which conveys the distance between the law and the common sense. The quintessence of the common sense of the community is not the law. The big gap between the two, and that is why. See, as a judge, many of them are, what is this benefit or doubt? Well, unless you attune yourself to the common sense or the common law, you will not be able to understand that at all. It many times becomes not my common sense, my innate common sense, my native common sense. There must be a difference between the two. And therefore, that's why I entered a caveat by saying, I'm not saying all these can be imported straight away into our system.
Naturally, sir, it's not possible.
Yes, it's not possible to do that. Unless certain fundamental, basic changes are brought into our system also. But it's good. The glory of the endeavor is in trying to make law more understandable to ordinary.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justice Karpagam, sir. Please. Please. You can come here, sir.
Humble pronouns to the Baba Sairam. Just like I could recall the words of Justice Petrayer. How a judgment should be. The ends of justice are higher than the ends of law, though the justice has got to be rendered in accordance with the law. So law is the root, justice the fruits. There is a sloka, Dharmo Rakshati Rakshitaka. You have quoted a Dharma is something I just Kandari also has got Dharma. All the Dharmas and all Duryodhanas, all the mother is Dharma. But Dharma is something, Dharmo Rakshati Rakshitaka means if you protect Dharma, Dharma will protect you. If you protect law, law will protect you. But ultimately justice is very important. Justice is very important. Judges and all, they give justice in the name of justice. They confine themselves in law only. But what is the essence? When you render judgments, what is the consequences to the victim? What is the consequences of this future society? That must be the local. That is the reason my considered view is every judge must read Ramayana and Mahabharata. We learn so many things from every character. Every character. That's the reason you must have a purity in the mind, purity in the words, purity in the actions. The word is watch is there. Watch. Satya Sai Baba says, what is watch? Watch your words, W. Watch your actions, A. Watch your thoughts, T. Watch your character, C. Watch your heart. So watch yourself. Don't justify yourself. If you commit mistakes and all, you please agree. But nowadays, we are in the world of justification. If a barber makes a mistake, he doesn't admit the mistake. It's a new style. If a tailor makes a mistake, he says, not a mistake, it's a new fashion. If an engineer makes a mistake, it's a new construction. If a doctor makes a mistake, it's a new diagnosis. If a teacher makes a mistake, he says new lesson. If a lawyer makes a mistake, it's a new interpretation. If a judge makes a mistake, it's a new law. That is here. But point is, manasekam, vachasekam, karmanyekam, mahatmanam. That is more important. We are living a purposeful life, peaceful life, purposeful life. Do help others, love all, serve all. Sahayata kare, prem kare, सबको all, love everyone and help one, hurt never. That's a law. Law alone is not a framing of a law. Get a justice, get a force. That is more important. That's the reason there is a Telugu saying, you know Telugu?
Yes, sir. My mother tongue is Telugu. Translated.
Manishi Vijayaniki 5 మెట్లు అవసరము.
5 steps for a man's success.
మనిషి విజయానికి 5 మెట్లు అవసరము. మంచి ఆలోచన, మంచి ప్రవర్తన, మంచి పని, మంచి భావన, మంచి మాటలు అవసరము. సరిగా ఉందా?
Absolutely.
తెలుగులో. We have to learn as a lawyer, we have to learn dharma. As a judge, we have to learn dharma. Please help. Love all, serve all. Thank you, Sairam.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone? Because we have to attend SCBA function also.
I think can we
Please,
start
Radha.
with one
Yeah,
thought to
sure.
wonder.
Yeah, please.
Is it a mere coincidence that Gandhari and the Lady of Justice are both blindfolded?
I have no idea, sir. I would keep them east and west separate. I travel with the time zones being different.
But the idea seems to be the same.
Gandhari is not blind, that says.
Blindfolded.
Yeah, I know, blindfolded, but she was not blind.
The other lady is also not blind.
Any lady member want to ask any clarification or any question? Okay, answer, huh? Who? No. Thank you very much, Sridhar. Now it's highly enlightening, and Vasant sir and Justice Karpagam sir and Raghavendra has given further enlightenment to adding. Thank you very much. This is your, we take your autograph, and we take your message. Yes, your autograph, next message.